Elon Musk and Donald Trump just had their first public falling out. And it happened over Canada, not China, not Russia, not some distant geopolitical flashpoint on the other side of the world. Canada, the country that shares the longest undefended border on Earth with the United States. The country that sends more goods across American state lines than any other nation. The country Trump has been treating like an economic enemy for months. Musk looked at that fight and stepped to the other side of it. And in doing so, he exposed something the White House has been working very hard to keep hidden. The chaos inside that building is no longer theoretical. It just walked out the front door. You need to understand what kind of moment this is. Not as a political story, not as a headline, but as a historical event. Because there is a very short list of moments in modern American politics where the man standing closest to the president, not his vice president, not his chief of staff, not his secretary of state, but the man with, but arguably more direct influence over the machinery of government than any of them publicly contradicts the president's central economic policy. That list is short because it almost never happens. Power structures at this level do not tolerate public dissent. They punish it. They bury it. They make examples of it. And yet here we are. Elon Musk, the wealthiest human being on this planet, the architect of the Department of Government Efficiency, the man who stood on stages at Trump rallies and thrust his fist into the air, has now told the world in plain language on his own platform that the tariffs being levied against Canada are a mistake. That word mistake carries more weight than almost any word you will hear spoken in Washington this year. To understand why, you have to go back, not just a few months, you have to go back decades. You have to understand the architecture of the relationship between the United States and Canada, because what Trump has been doing to that relationship is not just unusual, it is historically unprecedented. And when Musk stepped into that space and said what he said, he wasn't just disagreeing with a policy, he was making a judgment about the direction of American power itself. For more than 30 years, the economic relationship between the United States and Canada was governed by a principle so foundational that it was almost never discussed in public. The principle was simple. These two countries are not competitors. They are partners. Their economies are not parallel. They are interwoven. Supply chains don't just cross the border between them. They cross it dozens of times. A single car built in Michigan might contain parts that cross the US-Canada border 6 or 7 times before the vehicle is complete. Steel from Ontario becomes a beam in a building in Ohio. Grain from Alberta becomes bread on a table in Texas. The border between these two countries for the purposes of commerce has functioned less like a wall and more like a seam, the place where two pieces of a single fabric are joined. That architecture was formalized in 1994 with NAFTA and then reformalized in 2020 with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, a deal that Donald Trump himself negotiated and signed. The USMCA was, by Trump's own description at the time, the greatest trade deal in American history. He held it up as proof that he could do what his predecessors could not. He flew to its signing ceremony. He took credit for it on the campaign trail in 2020. And then, in the first weeks of his second administration, he began dismantling it piece by piece, tariff by tariff, threat by threat. This is the rule that just got broken, not just by Trump, by Musk's willingness to say publicly that breaking it is wrong. Now, you need to know who these men actually are. Not the version the media gives you, not the campaign trail version, the real version. Because to understand what just happened, you have to understand what each of them stands to lose and what each of them is actually fighting for. Donald Trump is 78 years old. He is in the second term of a presidency that by constitutional definition is his last. He has no more elections to win. He has no more bases to build. What he has for the first time in his political life is the freedom to govern entirely on instinct without the moderating pressure of needing to win something again. And his instinct on trade has been consistent for 40 years. Long before he ran for president, long before The Apprentice, long before Mar-a-Lago became a seed of power, Trump was writing op-eds and giving interviews, arguing that America's trade relationships were making the country weak, that tariffs were the answer, that the United States was being taken advantage of by its partners, its allies, and its neighbors. This is not a political position for Trump. It is a belief system. It is identity. When he looks at Canada and sees a trade surplus that favors Canadian goods in certain sectors, he does not see a partner. He sees a problem. And his solution, the only solution he has ever proposed, is economic pressure. The tariffs he imposed on Canadian goods in early 2025 were not subtle. 25% across a broad range of products, an additional 10% on Canadian energy. Numbers that to a casual observer might sound like standard trade negotiation. To anyone who understands how integrated these two economies actually are, those numbers are an act of economic aggression against a country that has never once threatened the United States militarily, never once competed with it for global dominance, and has stood shoulder to shoulder with American soldiers in every major conflict of the last century. Canada did not take this lying down. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who took over from Justin Trudeau in early 2025 and brought with him the credibility of a former central banker who had managed economies through genuine crisis, responded with retaliatory tariffs of his own. 25 billion Canadian dollars worth of American goods targeted with countermeasures. Carney stood in front of his country and said in language that was diplomatic in form but unflinching, in substance, that Canada would not be bullied, that the old relationship was over, that Canada would diversify its trade partnerships, strengthen its ties with Europe, and build an economy that was less dependent on American goodwill. That is the battlefield. Now, meet the man who just walked onto it from the American side and changed the geometry of the entire conflict. Elon Musk is 53 years old. He was born in South Africa, became a Canadian citizen before eventually becoming American. A fact that carries a certain irony given everything you are about to understand. He is the founder or co-founder of PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, The Boring Company, and X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. His personal net worth fluctuates around the $300 billion mark, making him not just the richest person alive, but richer than the GDP of most nations on Earth. He did not inherit this. He built it through a combination of genuine engineering genius, relentless work, and a willingness to bet everything on ideas that experts told him were impossible. His relationship with Trump is one of the most unusual political alliances in modern history. Musk spent most of his life as a political independent who leaned libertarian. He donated to both parties. He had a working relationship with the Obama administration on NASA contracts. He was not a Trump supporter in 2016 or 2020. Something shifted. By 2024, he was Allen, spending nearly $250 million of his own money to support Trump's campaign, using X as a megaphone for Trump's message, and then accepting a role in the administration as the head of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which was tasked with cutting federal spending and restructuring the bureaucracy of the American government. What motivated that shift is a subject of genuine debate. Some analysts point to Musk's growing frustration with progressive politics, particularly around issues of free speech and what he perceived as ideological capture of institutions. Others point to his business interests. Tesla benefits from deregulation. SpaceX benefits from government contracts, and a Trump administration promised both. Others still suggest something more personal. That Musk, a man who has always operated outside conventional systems, found in Trump a kindred spirit, a disruptor, a man who was willing to blow things up. Whatever the reason, the alliance was real and it was powerful. And now, for the first time in front of the entire world, it has shown a fracture line. Here is what actually happened. In late February of 2025, as the tariff war with Canada escalated and Canadian retaliatory measures began hitting American businesses in sectors ranging from agriculture to manufacturing, Musk took to X, his platform, his megaphone, the place where he has more direct reach than any television network on Earth, and posted a series of statements that were impossible to misread. He called the tariffs on Canada counterproductive. He argued that free trade between the United States and Canada was not a weakness, but a source of American strength. He specifically noted that integrated North American supply chains, particularly in the automotive and technology sectors, were being disrupted in ways that hurt American workers and American companies. He did not use diplomatic language. He did not hedge. He said what he believed. Let that land for a moment. The man running Doge, the man whose presence in the administration has been used repeatedly by the White House as proof that it is serious about efficiency and reform, the man whose name is synonymous with Trump's governing coalition. That man looked at the president's signature economic policy, the one Trump has staked his entire second-term legacy on, and said it was wrong. The White House response was telling. There wasn't one. Not immediately. No press secretary statement. No presidential post on Truth Social. No pushback from the trade office. Just silence. And in Washington, silence from the White House, when one of its most prominent allies contradicts. The president publicly is not neutrality. It is a signal. It means the situation is complicated enough that no one knows what to say. It means the conversations happening behind closed doors are not yet resolved. It means the chaos that reporters have been hinting at for weeks is real enough that the normal mechanisms of message discipline have broken down. Because here is what you have to follow when you follow this story. You have to follow the money. And the money tells a story that is far more complicated than the public narrative about tariffs protecting American jobs. Musk's companies are deeply integrated with Canadian supply chains. Tesla, despite being an American company, sources components from Canadian suppliers. Its gigafactory operations depend on materials that cross the northern border. The tariffs Trump imposed are not abstract policy for Musk. They are a direct tax on his own operations. Every percentage point of tariff on Canadian goods is a line item on Tesla's balance sheet. This is not a matter of ideology for Musk, or not ideology alone. It is economics. It is the cold arithmetic of a businessman who has built global supply chains and understands at a level most politicians never will what disrupting them actually costs. But there is something larger than Tesla at stake here. Musk's broader vision for SpaceX, for his energy ventures, for the technological infrastructure he is building, depends on a stable, integrated North American economic zone. He needs the kind of predictable regulatory environment and open commerce that USMCA was designed to provide. What Trump is doing to Canada is not just damaging a bilateral relationship. From Musk's perspective, it is destabilizing the very platform on which American technological leadership in the 21st century must be built. And Musk, whatever you think of him, is not a man who stays quiet when he believes something important is being destroyed. Now, pull back further, because this is where the deeper truth lives. What Musk's public break with Trump on Canada actually reveals is something the White House has been desperate to conceal since the first days of the second term. There is no unified governing philosophy inside this administration. There is Trump's instinct, powerful, consistent, and often disconnected from the operational realities of a 21 trillion economy. And then there is everyone else, the advisors, the allies, the cabinet members, the outside influencers like Musk, who have been operating in the space between Trump's instincts and the actual consequences of acting on them. For months, that space was managed quietly. Disagreements were handled in private. The public face of the administration was unified. But unity that is only maintained through silence is not unity. It is suppression. And suppression eventually fails. What you are watching right now is the suppression failing. This is the thing the mainstream political media keeps missing about the Trump-Musk relationship. It was never ideological, alignment. It was a transactional alliance between two men who each believed the other could give them something they needed. Trump needed Musk's money, his platform, and the cultural legitimacy of having the world's most famous entrepreneur in his corner. Musk needed access to government contracts, to regulatory relief, to the ability to shape federal policy in ways that served his long-term vision for American technological dominance. As long as both men were getting what they needed, the alliance held. But tariffs on Canada are a point where those interests diverge, where Trump's instinct to punish and pressure runs directly into Musk's need for open, integrated, functional markets. And when interests diverge at that level between men of that power, it does not stay private for long. The world is watching this and drawing conclusions, and those conclusions matter enormously for what comes next. Canada is watching. Mark Carney is watching. And what Carney sees is an opening, because when the most powerful private citizen in America publicly questions the tariffs being aimed at your country, it changes the negotiating landscape in ways that are subtle but real. It signals that the American position is not monolithic, that there are powerful voices inside the American power structure who want a different outcome, that if Canada holds firm, if it maintains its retaliatory posture and continues building alternative trade relationships, the internal pressure on the Trump administration may eventually force a recalibration. Carney is too experienced, too disciplined to say any of this publicly, but you can be certain he is thinking it, and you can be certain his trade negotiators are incorporating it into their strategy. Europe is watching. The European Union has been navigating its own set of American tariff threats throughout 2025. And every crack in the Trump administration's unified front is information for European negotiators. If Musk's public dissent signals genuine internal division, it suggests that economic pressure combined with patient diplomacy may produce results that direct confrontation cannot. And American businesses are watching, particularly the manufacturers, the agricultural exporters, the technology companies whose supply chains cross into Canada every single day. They have been watching the tariff war with a mixture of alarm and helplessness, unable to publicly challenge a president who has made economic nationalism the centerpiece of his identity. Musk's willingness to say what many of them believe privately gives permission, intellectual permission, if not yet political permission, to a conversation that has been suppressed inside American boardrooms and trade associations since January. This is what happens when the man with the loudest voice in the room decides to use it differently. Now let's talk about what comes next, because history does not pause to let us absorb what just happened. It keeps moving. And the trajectory of this story, based on everything laid out here, points in several possible directions, and you need to understand all of them. In the near term, the most likely immediate outcome is managed tension. Trump will not fire Musk. Musk will not resign from Doge. The alliance is damaged, but not destroyed, because both men still need what the other provides. What changes is the dynamic inside the White House. Advisors who have been privately skeptical of the Canada tariffs now have cover to raise their concerns more forcefully. Trade negotiators who have been boxed in by the president's maximalist position may find slightly more room to maneuver. The public break, paradoxically, may create private space for the kind of pragmatic adjustment that neither side can announce as a retreat. In the medium term, the next 30 to 60 days, watch for one of two scenarios. Either the Trump administration quietly begins signaling openness to renegotiating the terms of the Canada tariffs, framed not as a concession, but as a deal being struck because Trump has always needed to call everything a deal, even when it is a retreat or the tariffs hold and the retaliatory measures from Canada escalate further, hitting American sectors, agriculture, energy, automotive, hard enough that the political consequences begin registering in the states that matter most to the Republican coalition: Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin. States where the economic integration with Canada is not an abstraction, but a daily reality felt by farmers and factory workers and small business owners. And in the longer term, the consequences of this moment extend far beyond any single trade dispute. Because what Musk's public break with Trump represents at its deepest level is a question about what kind of country America intends to be in the 21st century. Trump's vision is nationalist, bilateral, transactional, a world where America uses its size and power to extract maximum concessions from every partner, ally, and neighbor. Musk's vision is something different. It is global in its ambitions, integrated in its economics, and fundamentally dependent on the kind of stable, rules-based international order that allows companies to build supply chains, launch satellites, and operate across borders without constant political disruption. These two visions are not compatible. They can coexist in an alliance when the stakes are low enough. They cannot coexist when the stakes are this high, which means the fracture you are watching today is not the end of something, it is the beginning. The most important thing to understand as you process what happened today is this: the chaos inside the White House is not incidental to the Trump administration's second term. It is structural. It flows from the fundamental tension between a president who governs by instinct and a governing coalition that includes people with incompatible visions for what that governing is supposed to achieve. Musk is not the only person inside that coalition who has reservations about the Canada tariffs. He is just the only one with enough power, enough independence, and enough public platform to say so out loud. He is the canary. And the canary just sang the world you understood this morning, the one where Trump and Musk were a unified force, where the administration spoke with one voice, where the chaos was managed and the alliances held. That world is gone. What replaces it is uncertain. That uncertainty is uncomfortable. But it is also important because uncertainty at the top of the most powerful government on earth creates space. Space for new outcomes. Space for recalibration. Space for the kind of correction that markets and allies and neighbors have been waiting for. Canada did not start this fight. It did not ask for this fight. It has been absorbing economic pressure from a country it has stood beside through every war, every crisis, every moment of genuine danger for over 100 years. And now, the most powerful private citizen in America has looked at what is being done to that relationship and said publicly in plain language in front of the world that it is wrong. That matters. Not because Elon Musk is a hero, not because his motives are pure. They are not purely altruistic. They never are at this level of power. But because in the architecture of this particular moment, his voice changes the geometry. It shifts the internal calculus of an administration that has been operating on the assumption that its most powerful allies are fully on board. They are not. And now everyone knows it. The story is not over. It is barely beginning. The retaliatory tariffs are still in place. The Canadian countermeasures are still active. The USMCA is still being treated as a suggestion rather than a binding agreement. The supply chains are still being disrupted. The American workers in border states, whose livelihoods depend on integrated North American commerce, are still facing uncertainty they did not create and cannot control. None of that changed today. What changed today is the political architecture around it. What changed today is that the wall of silence inside the Trump coalition developed its first visible crack. And walls once cracked have a way of continuing. Pay attention to what happens in the next 72 hours. Watch whether the White House responds to Musk's posts or absorbs them into silence. Watch whether Musk elaborates or retreats. Watch whether Canadian officials reference his comments in their diplomatic communications carefully, obliquely, but unmistakably. Watch the markets. Watch the agricultural futures in states that depend on Canadian trade. Watch the automotive sector data. The story is in the details now. It is in the things that get said in rooms we cannot see, and in the things that don't get said in rooms where cameras are watching. History is moving. It is moving in real time. And the thing about history moving in real time is that most people do not recognize it until it has already moved past them. You are not one of those people. You are paying attention. You are asking the right questions. And the right question right now, the one that should keep you engaged, that should keep you watching, that should make you think before you close this window, is this one. If the man who helped build this administration is already publicly questioning its most consequential economic policy, what else is he questioning in private? And how long before the rest of it becomes public?